So thank you. So you might know me from doing work on Write the Docs, but my day job and kind of what got me interested in documentation is actually a project I work on called Read the Docs. And so what Read the Docs is basically a open source documentation hosting platform. So if you're a Python developer, or you do much kind of work in the development world, you've probably run into Read the Docs a few different times. This is kind of just our webpage at readthedocs.org. As I did mention, we host open source documentation, but our platform is also all open source. So you can actually go on GitHub and look at all that makes Read the Docs kind of tick. But today I wanted to talk about kind of a specific thing that we've been working on that I'm pretty excited about. And so this is actually embedding content from your documentation. So similar to what Swapnil was talking about, I think he's talking about reuse when authoring, which is something I love. Like our conference websites do a lot of this, where we have our little, lightning talk description is the same across all our events, but then the little part at the bottom with the schedule links and all that kind of stuff is different. And authoring reuse is super important. Then what I'm talking about here is actually reusing the published content, which is maybe kind of the next step. So you can see here from our documentation, there's kind of three primary use cases that we can think about here. One is kind of contextualized tooltips on documentation pages. One is inline help in the application, and one is just kind of an embed API. So I'm actually going to go backwards here and start with the API. So Read the Docs and all documentation hosted on Read the Docs exposes this API that does embedding. And this is actually a way to get HTML formatted content of any published documentation page or section on Read the Docs via API. So you can see here, this is a content block that's basically just the HTML of a section. And then if you point it at a page, you can also get a list of all the headers that are on that page. And then you can also embed specific header levels as well. So what this looks like in practice, an actual API response. So here you can see we got API embed and actually just passed in a list of Read the Docs features. And so that is actually a live example of this. So that's kind of how this is all built on the back end, is it's an API that you can call. And so what we've built is a few different kind of interfaces on top of this. So as a user of a project, you can go in and here you can see kind of all the different pages of our documentation. And then when I click that specific page, it'll give me the list of sections. So here, let's say we want to talk about version documentation. What this does is gives you a small little JavaScript thing that you can put in any web page. And then this show content button is kind of an example of what that looks like. So we're pulling, that page about version documentation off our live, hosted docs, and we're able to embed it directly in our actual web page here. So one example that this is useful for is help, right? So you see over here, there's this help button. If I click that, for example, this is going to actually open up. This is just kind of a proof of concept. This isn't live, but yeah, so the idea here is you would actually be able to embed your documentation inside your application without having to make users go back and forth, which makes your documentation more valuable because you're able to show it in more places. The last thing that I'm really excited about and the thing we've been building lately, you might be used to this on Wikipedia. Let me make it a little bigger. Is basically if you hover over any link on Wikipedia, you'll get this little kind of like snippet that pulls in kind of information. So it's really great for reference material and kind of understanding what something is. And so what we're doing is we're actually building this for software documentation. So here you can actually see I forked the Python documentation to implement this feature. So now anytime you hover over a link that is within the Python documentation, you're able to reference exactly what that means. So that's using our embed API to pull in that content from the link that's on the far side of that URL. And so this will work for any of these other links. And we actually have configurability that lets you show full pages. So this is actually going to pull up kind of a full pop-up because it's a much larger thing. But anyway, this is a Sphinx extension called HoverXref. And so I think this is a really cool, just one other cool example here is kind of in an API reference format, you can really just kind of get like full information there. And that is my 5 minutes. But anyway, this is just something we've been working on, and I'm pretty excited about it. And I'd love to talk more with folks when you have a chance.